Keep listening, learning, keep learning the Tom Daniel Show. Keep listening, keep learning the Tom Daniel Show.
You're listening to The Tom Daniel Show, and I'm your host, Tom Daniel. Today I want to talk about something that is really profound to me. It's incredibly rich. I want to explore how music shapes one of life's biggest, most universal experiences, and that's death, funeral, and burial traditions in the Deep South. Everything from those sacred hymns that your grandmother sang, the mournful cry of a gospel choir, the slow march and joyous noise of a brass band, or a lone fiddle crying out over a pine box. Music has always helped us grieve and remember. Music helps transform all that sorrow into something that lasts. You know, it actually makes sense that I have another podcast about ghost stories because I love graveyards. I always have. There's just something about them that totally intrigues me. Very few people know this, but when my wife and I first started dating, several of our first dates were spent together in Pine Hill Cemetery in Auburn, Alabama. We were either sitting or talking or walking and exploring. Now, over the years, she and I visited several graveyards in various states, and we've witnessed some really bizarre burial traditions. We've taken charcoal rubbings from notable headstones and perhaps even got chased by a zombie out of a graveyard in Florida. That particular incident closely matched the opening scene of the classic original Night of the Living Dead movie that came out in 1968. My wife and I stopped at a small cemetery outside of Milton, Florida, late one afternoon in the late 90s and just started exploring like we usually do. Now, at some point, we both noticed an old man walking very stiffly across the graveyard, heading straight for us. Now, unlike the idiots in the movie, we didn't fool around. We got out of there. Now, over the years, my wife and I have collected a lot of little tidbits about southern graveyards. Did you know that people are buried on an east-west axis so that they are facing the rising sun? That way, they'll be looking into the face of Jesus on the morning of the rapture. However, occasionally you'll find a grave that's turned sideways. It's on a north-south axis. And whenever you see that, that's an indication that the deceased died out of favor with the church or the community, and they're basically buried wrong on purpose. I've seen southern graves with toys around them, with little trinkets and seashells across the top or around them. If it's toys or trinkets, then it's usually the family or friends who are decorating the grave with items of significance to the deceased. I've seen Coke bottles buried upside down around the grave, which is just a decoration without any hidden meaning. It's just basically people making do with what they have. And I've also seen old graves with seashells on them, and this usually indicates a slave grave, as the seashells are symbolic of freedom. Now, what makes the southern approach to mourning so distinctive? It really feels like more than just going through the motions in the South. And a funeral isn't just a formality. It's deeply communal. It's a moment when music becomes memory, and memory becomes something you can hum for the rest of your life. One of the most familiar sounds at a southern funeral is the gentle rise of a hymn. Maybe Shall We Gather at the River, or Amazing Grace, or Farther Along. And these aren't just songs. They're sacred heirlooms passed from one generation to the next, folded between the pages of worn family Bibles, and sung by voices that are trembling with both grief and hope. You'll hear these hymns in country churches where the floorboards creak and the choir's made up of cousins and neighbors. You'll hear them on an old cassette tape played from the pulpit when there's nobody left to sing. And sometimes you'll hear them out in the open air at graveside, where the wind carries the melody out over the cemetery and into the trees. It's really part of the Southern landscape itself. Consider the song "Will the Circle Be Unbroken," made popular by the Carter family. It promises a joyful reunion one day when your immediate family will all be together again. By and by, Lord, by and by. Now, I sang that song graveside at my own mother's funeral in 2023. To be honest, I'd known for many, many years that I was going to do that, no matter what. It wasn't scripted. It really wasn't part of the service. I just started singing. It's that unique mixture of sorrow and salvation that defines Southern mourning. There's a deep belief, especially in the rural Protestant communities, that death isn't the end. It's a crossing over. And music, more than anything else, helps make that crossing together. Think about the lyrics of the song "I'll Fly Away." It begins, "Some glad morning when this life is o'er, I'll fly away." That's not just a metaphor. For the folks who sing it, it's a sacred promise, a literal belief that their loved one has left the pain of this world behind and taken flight toward glory, toward home. You'll hear that same blend of grief and grit at a homegoing. That's the term used in Black Southern culture, a celebration that the deceased has gone home to be with the Lord. There may be weeping, but there'll also be shouting. There'll be clapping. There will definitely be music, lots of music. In Black churches, music is the train that we all ride through the pearly gates. It's a very different energy in contrast to the often somber, stoic, and reserved funerals that you see in other parts of the country. Up north, they whisper at funerals. You can't understand a thing they say, but down here, we sing. We sing loud and we sing proud at funerals, as if we could sing the dead straight into heaven. You know, sometimes we do. You're listening to The Tom Daniels Show. We'll be right back.
The Tom Daniels Show. The Tom Daniels Show. The Tom. What are you waiting for? The Tom Daniels Show. The Tom Daniels Show. The Tom Daniels Show.
Now, welcome back to The Tom Daniels Show, and I knew I could count on Mary Mac for this episode. Mary Mac is the world's most perfect band. And we've been talking about music and Southern funerals, and nowhere is funeral music more famous or more joyful than in New Orleans. The jazz funeral is one of the city's most iconic cultural expressions, and it's built around a single powerful idea that life should be celebrated, even in death. Now, it usually starts slow. The brass band plays a dirge, maybe "Nearer My God to Thee" or "Just a Closer Walk with Thee." The mourners walk in step, quiet, somber. The mood is respectful. Grief gets its moment. But once the body's laid to rest, then cut loose, man, everything changes. The tempo lifts, the drums kick in, the trumpets start to dance, and suddenly the funeral procession becomes a second-line parade, a joyful explosion of music, color, umbrellas, and movement. Now, the first line is the band and the family. The second line is everybody else, and the neighbors, the friends, even strangers who just heard the music and decided to join in. One of the greatest things about New Orleans is that if you see a parade, you're invited. Everybody's invited. It's an incredible communal outpouring. Now, this isn't disrespectful. It's deeply spiritual. Because in New Orleans, death isn't the end of the music. It's the start of a new rhythm. It's a collective understanding that sorrow and joy not only can, but should exist side by side. Life, even when you're mourning, demands full expression. I know of no other place in the world except New Orleans that celebrates a second-line funeral like this, because nowhere else in the world can claim to be the birthplace of jazz. Also, it's not an ancient ritual handed down through the generations. The New Orleans funeral didn't become a thing until the birth of jazz in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Outside of New Orleans, the rest of the South is known for traffic completely shutting down when a funeral procession drives by. In the South, you do not move when that line of cars with their headlights on drives by. It doesn't matter if you knew the person or not. Out of respect for the deceased and support for the grieving family, the local law enforcement will shut down intersections and cars just simply stop right where they are until it passes completely by. I mean, that's just what we do. Now, one of the funniest stories I ever heard about this involved jazz drummer Art Blakey and a Southern funeral. Blakey was notorious for being a strong advocate of jazz education. Now, according to the story, Art Blakey was driving through a small southern town when the traffic got completely shut down because of a funeral procession. Now, since he couldn't get past the cemetery until the service was over, he just decided to get out of the car and listen to the eulogy. And when the minister asked if anyone had anything to say about the deceased, there was a prolonged, awkward silence. So Art Blakey stepped up and said, well, if nobody's got anything to say about the departed, I'd like to say a few words about jazz. Now, head north a bit into the Appalachian Mountains, and you'll find a different kind of mourning music. Now, there the tradition is quieter, but no less powerful. It's a whole different soundscape, but just as profound. Appalachian funerals are often unaccompanied, raw, and deeply emotional. Now, think of shape note singings. They're rooted in Scots-Irish balladry, brought over centuries ago and fostered by the faith, the hardships, and the isolation of mountain communities. Now, one of the most famous, haunting examples is the song "O Death." Now, a lot of folks first heard it in the movie "O Brother, Where Art Thou?", sung by Ralph Stanley in a chilling, trembling voice. But that song's been around a lot longer than that. It's an old mountain prayer, pleading, bargaining with death like it's a person just standing right there at the door. "O death, won't you spare me over till another year?" Now, these songs aren't polished. They aren't performed with perfect harmony or trained voices. They're sung with cracks and quivers in the voice, often by somebody standing next to a homemade coffin on a wooden hillside. And in that simplicity, there's a kind of holiness that you can't fake. Once, a choir director heard me listening to some recorded examples of this kind of music, and she sneered, "Why do they sing so nasally like that?" And I answered, "Because they're doing it right." And sometimes the singer isn't even a relative. They're what folks used to call a sorrow singer, someone known in the community to step forward and sing for the dead, even if they barely knew them. A voice called up by duty and spirit. Now, when it comes to Southern funerals, I've seen it all. I've seen a tiny country funeral where the preacher didn't show up, so somebody's uncle stood up and read scripture. One of the cousins, bless her heart, sang "I'll Fly Away," off key, tears soaking her hymn book. I've been to black funerals where the choir shook the rafters with "Precious Lord, Take My Hand." I've sat in pews where you could feel the Holy Ghost move through the music long before the sermon began. And I've been to funerals with no music at all, just an old cassette player on the pulpit playing a recording of the deceased singing when they were young. These are the moments that stick with you. The song someone chooses for their own funeral, that tells you everything about them. It tells you how they understood the afterlife. It tells you what kind of hope they held. And sometimes it tells you what kind of pain they carried. You better believe I've already selected all the music I'd like to be played at my funeral. Funerals are a funny thing, aren't they? They're the most heartbreaking moments in a family's life, but they're also where legacy becomes real, and music is the bridge. Genealogy doesn't just live in census records or family Bibles. It lives in the soundtrack that we inherit. in the way someone hums a verse when they're sad, in the way your grandfather tapped his foot to Will the Circle Be Unbroken at every funeral he ever went to. Music binds us, not just to the dead, but to the living. And when we sing those same songs, we're not just remembering, we're belonging. So maybe the most important question you can ask your family isn't, where are we from? Maybe it's, what did we sing when it was time to say goodbye? Because in the South, those songs, they're your real family tree. If today's stories reminded you of a song from your own family or a funeral that left a lasting melody in your heart, I'd love to hear about it. Leave me a comment. Send an email to the show at thetomdanielshow@gmail.com. And remember, in the South, we don't bury the music with the body. We let it rise. This has been The Tom Daniels Show. Keep listening. Keep learning.
Keep listening, learning. Keep learning. The Tom Daniel Show. Keep listening. Keep learning. The Tom Daniel Show.
Take a break.
Take a break from your usual routine and tune in to the Tom Daniel Show. You'll discover the world of melodies and stories that you might not know. Keep learning, keep learning. The Tom Daniel Show. Keep listening. Keep learning. Keep learning. The Tom Daniel Show. The Tom Daniel Show. The Tom Daniel Show. The Tom. What are you waiting for? The Tom Daniel Show. The Tom Daniel Show. The Tom Daniel Show.